Good morning and welcome everyone to today's CFOLC program, Distance Businessing. My name is Stacy Hall and I'm the California Regional Director for the CFO Leadership Council. We also have Debbie Dunn, Marketing Director for CFOLC on the call and helping me facilitate the session. We hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. We thank you for your continued membership and partnership within our tight-knit finance executive community. Just a few things before we get started. We want to let everyone know your lines are muted to avoid distractions. However, we certainly encourage your questions and comments throughout today's discussion. So please feel free to type your questions in the question box. Get to your questions answered as we can. If we run out of time, we'll send out the questions and the answers in our email to everyone after the program. So please jump in when you need to. If you're a member of the CFOLC, you will receive CPE credit for today's webcast, just as you would during a live event. To receive credit, you must be a current member and answer at least 5 of the 6 polling questions asked today. We will interrupt the discussion to bring those to you and give you a chance to answer. In order to answer the polling questions effectively, you must be logged into today's session. If you've dialed in and want to receive CPEs, please hang up and use the direct link provided to you at registration. We will share some information on membership at the end of the webcast. The good news, if you join today, you will qualify for today's CPE. I want to take a moment, just as we do with our live events, and we want to start today with a little shout out to our sponsors who make these events possible. First, Bank of America, one of our national sponsors. Every CFO knows the importance of having a trusted financial services partner, and CFOLC has been lucky to have Bank of America as one of our longtime sponsors. I cannot say enough good things about our Orange County Steering Committee representatives, Lisa Westhaver and Rabia Hassin. They're excellent resources for you. Oracle NetSuite, another one of our national sponsors, and a big welcome to our newest steering committee member, Kirk Perez. Kirk is Orange County's go-to person for NetSuite. He has a very thorough understanding of CFOLC membership needs for cloud accounting solutions. Adaptive Insights, Corey Reed is our steering committee representative. He's there to help members with their FP&A solutions. You want to get to know Corey. He's an excellent resource during these times. Effectus Group, their managed accounting services. Steering committee Matt Sevich knows what's expected of today's CFOs. Matt is a longtime supporter of the CFOLC. Not only can he tell members how to prepare for their next advancement, but plan for staffing changes in their business, which we know is critical right now. Hughes Marino, I can't say enough good things about Hughes Marino. Business real estate guru Mike Lewis, Scott Johnstone are an invaluable real estate resource. They specialize in tenant representation for our CFOLC members. Make sure you're connected with Mike and Scott. Mike brought in Nick Willis, one of our speakers today, and I'm excited about what they have to share with you. They are connected to everyone, so make sure you reach out to them. KPMG, whether it's figuring out the new tax changes or guiding you through an audit, KPMG can help you through it. Mike Polenzani and team are there for you. We certainly miss meeting in their offices and seeing everyone's faces. Hopefully we can do that again soon. Woodruff Sawyer, I also can't say enough good things about Woodruff Sawyer. There's no better time than now for CFO members to delve into risk solutions with insurance partner Woodruff Sawyer. Tyson Freeberg and Blaine Sherwin can help you with anything you need. They have an abundance of resources right now, and we're so happy to have Blaine on our panel today. He has some great information to share with you. I just want to say, real quickly, we've chosen each of our sponsors because we see them as thought leaders for their exclusive categories. I encourage you to reach out to them and connect. You can find them all on our CFOLC website on the Orange County page. So thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to our amazing steering committee members. You can find them all on our website. And I think now more than ever, we just need the support and connections with each other. So even though we're virtual, I can't emphasize enough the importance of collaboration. So now to kick things off today, we're actually going to start, we're going to launch our first polling question, and this will just kind of give us a moment to see where everybody's at before we get started. So the first question is, what percentage of your staff were remote before the pandemic? So if you think about before all this went about, what percentage were working remotely? Was it less than 10%, 10 to 25%, 26 to 50%, 51 to 75%, or more than 75%. So it looks like just about everybody has voted. And interesting, so 80% was less than 10%, and then 10 to 25 at 20%. So our next polling question that's coming up in a bit, that will be interesting to compare results. But before we do that, I want to introduce you to Maureen Singh, one of our steering committee members. She's for the Orange County chapter. We actually stole her away from the Los Angeles chapter when she moved to Orange County a few years back, so I feel pretty fortunate about that. She's the CFO of Toca Football and has an amazing background. So I will let her introduce herself and tell you a little bit about her, and maybe she can share what percentage of her staff was working remotely before the pandemic. That would probably be interesting. So Maureen.
Sure. You. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Distance Businessing. As Stacy mentioned, I work at Toca Football in Costa Mesa, and I'm the CFO here. Been here for a couple of years, and we have done a lot, gone through a lot with COVID-19, so looking forward to sharing that with you. My background has been a lot with multi-location facilities, like we have 12 facilities right now with soccer training. I've also been with Sinopolis Luxury Cinemas. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. That's also multi-location. I've been with different restaurant groups as well. In addition to that, I enjoy teaching. So I've been teaching for the past 15 years at National University in the MBA classes as an adjunct faculty. And on a volunteer basis, I volunteer as a logistics officer with Civil Air Patrol. It's an auxiliary of the Air Force program, and then recently became an advisory board member of UCI, again in guest journeys because of multi-location. So that's been my background. I'm looking forward to sharing a lot with you from a customer-facing standpoint and a CFO standpoint. So we've all been impacted, right, with COVID-19 in some form or the other. So we are here today to share with our various backgrounds our knowledge and our experience, what we've gone through with our businesses from a CFO standpoint, from different standpoint like insurances, and you have Nicholas also with planning, interior planning. So with that, I'll pass it on to Blaine, and he'll introduce himself and take it from there, Blaine.
Thanks, Maureen. My name is Blaine Sherwin. I'm with Woodruff Sawyer. We are a commercial insurance and risk advisory firm, and I specialize in the property and casualty as a firm. We're kind of delineated into property and casualty, which is your traditional property, workers' compensation, general liability. But then we also do employee benefits, which is your medical and dental. And then we have a third leg of the stool, if you will, which is our corporate executive protection, which is management liability, your directors and officers, your employment practices. And as a firm, we're delineated about a third, a third, a third. But I started my career within the consumer packaged goods, the CPG industry, where I was able to learn a lot about supply chain. And I brought that knowledge into the insurance world, and spend my time working with companies to mitigate the risk. I mean, a lot of my competitors will focus on placing the insurance and then doing some loss control measures afterwards. We kind of try to flip that on its head and put a lot of the risk control measures ahead of time before we go out to market, and then we articulate the improved risk profile of your company to the carriers, and that way we're able to structure things with broader terms and conditions at more favorable premiums to you. Answering the question with regard to remote learning, we were fortunate, I guess, in that we had kind of hit office capacity. Nick, you should have been speaking with us last year when we ran out of room. And so we took a lot of at least in the Irvine office, we took a lot of the service people and did them on a flex schedule. So they would come in Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then they had a mirror that did the opposite. And that was really just to facilitate the size of our office. But we started doing, some Zoom meetings. I was always an office rat, and now have kind of been forced to figure out the remote. And so I think about 25% of our staff was on a somewhat of a flex work from home schedule prior to COVID. And needless to say, we've been in work from home since about mid-March.
And next we'll take it to Nick to introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. Blaine, had I been talking to you a year ago, we would have looked at densifying your space, and I think that conversation has changed now. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nick Willis, and as Maureen said, I'm the Interior Planning Director at Hughes Marino. Hughes Marino is a tenant representation firm, and we have integrated service lines, and I lead the planning and design team and work with our colleagues in brokerage, in tenant representation, project management, project lease administration, and our legal teams as a fully integrated service for our real estate clients. As part of the interior planning group, we work with our clients in pre-lease strategies and design strategies and help them understand from an advisory standpoint how the impact of their real estate decisions influences the design of their space and vice versa. And so in the last 4 months, 5 months of the pandemic, we've actually pivoted a bit to also talking to our clients about how to return to the office safely and what the future of their office space looks like. And I'm excited to get into that with you in a minute.
Excellent. So I think with that, before we jump to Maureen, we're actually going to launch our second polling question, which will compare answers from the previous one. So now in this one, looking at your staff, what percentage of your staff is currently working remotely? Is it less than 10%, 10 to 25%, 26 to 50%, 51 to 75, or more than 75? So we'll give it just a few more seconds for people to vote, and it'll be interesting to compare it with our first one. So Debbie's launching the results. So now it's the complete opposite. So 80% is more than 75%, so probably not too surprising, and then less than 10% for and then 10 to 25% at 10%. So definitely different times. So I think that leads to our discussion today. So with that, Maureen, I'm going to let you jump in and tell us what you've been able to do with Toca football.
Absolutely, thank you. So the prior question, I'll just touch on it. Like most people, about only 10% of our staff really work from home. And right now, at the corporate office, it's probably 95% of everyone's working at home, except for the locations where we are back open. So around mid-March is when we all got the information about, we got direction and guidance from the governor, like we should be working at home, businesses closed, and really it's just essential services that will open. And at Toca, sports is not an essential service. However, we were able to work with the state and into a certain category, but like everyone else, we were closed. And we were closed from about mid-March to around mid-April. And during that time frame, we formed an internal, within the corporate office, we formed a task force for COVID-19. So what we did is we had the head of marketing, the head of finance, myself, we had our in-house counsel, head of human resources, and head of operations. So with these various department heads, we got together, and we'd never done something like this before, as all of you have not gone through a pandemic, and it's like doing things for the first time. So we formed this task force to decide, how do we deal with the situation? How can we handle it? How can we emerge from it? So the two main concerns we had right away is our employees and our customers. So we were paying our employees 80% of their pay, even while we were closed. And the PPP loan helped significantly with that, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. But we paid our employees, and they were at home. We wanted to keep them engaged, and we also want to keep our customers engaged. So we came up with the idea in the task force, how about if we start a Facebook page, we have our employees come up with videos of creative ways of how to still engage in business, how to still do soccer training. And it was creative. Like at times, I remember one video, you got cans of, like canned beans or different canned food at home, and you use those as goals. And we mailed soccer balls to every one of our active customers. So we were staying in touch with them. They all got a soccer ball at home, and we would post these videos every day. What are some of the things you can do? Keeping in mind, some people had a backyard, some people had a patio, some people didn't. It's just indoors. And came up with these different things of how they can still use their soccer ball safely within their house and how they can stay engaged. So we would post videos every day. Our customers would respond, and they would even give us ideas of some of the things they came up with. So we had that interaction going, keeping our employees engaged, keeping customers engaged. And then Atlanta was one of the first places that opened up, and so we could open our centers in Atlanta. So we sent emails out to our customers and posted it on Facebook that we were opening up in a week's time. And we had gone through a long list of what are some of the things we should do before we open. But I'll get to that in a minute. The part with the customers, from the moment that email went out, the phone lines just went crazy. Everyone just wanted something to do. And to be able to come and play sports in a center, everyone. So at least 60% of our business revenue came back like immediately, and we were booked out for like a whole month just because people wanted something to do. And so what we did as a company is, for one, we wanted to make sure that we got a vendor to come in and completely sanitize the facility. So every location was completely sanitized. And then they came in every week to do that. And we did interim cleaning in between. We did that and made sure we ordered masks. So every employee had to wear a mask. We got the handheld temperature. So everyone walking into the door, we would take the temperature. Employees had to wear gloves as well. And we had these plexi screens that we put up at the front desk. So every customer that come in with like a parent bringing their child for soccer training, only 2 people were allowed into coming in. So a parent could not bring the athlete and a second child. If they did, they'll have to wait in the car. So we limited the number of people in the building. And then we also had to think about so many people coming in for sessions, and what if they're leaving and coming in? We can have too many people in the lobby area. So you can enter in the front, but you exit at the back. So we limit the number of people and distance. So we went to that level of extent to manage and make sure that safety was of utmost, and letting our customers know that these are the things that we put in place prior to opening. And then when we did open, we had to think about some of the things that, what if one of the employees got COVID-19, or what if a customer did? How do we handle that? The one thing that we didn't think about, and we actually had to learn this on the fly, is customer just refused to wear a mask. And it's your customer, so how do you handle that in a delicate manner? So with our in-house counsel, we came up with a way, and basically we explained that this is for the safety of our employees and our customers, and we'd like you to wear a mask as you enter, but it's your choice. If you choose not to, you may wait outside. So we had to just handle that and learn as we go. But then, and we did have employees who got COVID-19, and that's the first case we had when an employee got COVID-19, we shut down the center right away. We got the vendor to come in and sanitize completely again. We called the athletes, their parents, and let them know that their trainer had COVID-19. So from the minute we know, we've canceled all sessions, shut down the center for a day or two. And then we were worried about the customers. What would they say? But the message was received so well. Our customers were like, thank you for telling us, thank you for letting us know you didn't have to, and we really appreciate you doing this. And then, they go get tested to see whether they were positive or not. So these are things that we learned as we went through. And one of the things that we had to do is make sure all of our customers signed a waiver, because now coming in, it's different. Business is different, everything's different. So we changed our waivers, and we had each customer sign. So these are some of the things that we did. We have camps, like group activity. We initially didn't do any group activity. We wanted to have the center open and see how things go. And we were able to actually do camps by having plexiglasses and have 6 feet distancing and conduct training like that. And parents actually wanted their kids, like, how can you make it happen? We're here to help. And some of the ideas came from some of the customers to do the group camps, but do it with social distancing. So those are some of the things that we did. Now with the PPP, we were ready to file the application for it. If you guys remember, on the 5th is when the applications, I think on the 3rd is when, April 3rd is when it was open. We were ready, our applications were complete. I was with JP Morgan on a Sunday, which is the 5th, it was open. So on that day, we had to redo the application because they changed a bit and submitted it. And within 5 days, we got our funding. And I have to say that the PPP really saved us a lot. We didn't lay off employees. We didn't have to furlough many employees, just a handful. But we paid most of our employees 80% of their paychecks. And PPP allowed us to do that. And when we were open a month later, then we continued to, we switched back to paying 100%. And rent was another big thing. We didn't pay most of our vendors because business was not occurring, but rent and payroll are the two things we had to pay. We contacted our landlords for rent, and we didn't get rent abatement, but we did get rent deferral. So the landlords were, okay, while you're closed, you can not pay during that time, but make up for it in the next few months. So some of the landlords were willing to work with us on that, but as far as reduction in rent, that simply did not happen. So these are some of the things that we did as a company. And with that, I would like to pass it on next to Nick, and he will share.
Maureen, before you pass it on, a couple of questions came in that I think would be interesting for you to talk about. You know, one is in regards to when you think about employees in COVID-19, this question, you know, says, we track and trace and report to local public health county. We do the track and trace through our intranet for reporting. Is there an app or a standard system to track and trace that you know of? We serve 40,000 K through 12 in California and also out of state. So is there anything that, you know, you guys are doing, or do you know anything about that?
The track and trace employees or customers? I wasn't sure.
I think it's employees. I think it's like they've got students, so I'm sure it's, I would assume it's employees, maybe students too.
Yeah, so what, if this answers the question, what we did with our payroll company is they were able to create reports specifically for tracking COVID-19 timeframe and for the PPP. So there are special reports specifically for that purpose. I'm not sure if I understood that answering the question.
Or like, do you know if there are any apps or anything if somebody is trying to trace their employees, you know, because like you've said, I think you've
traced employees.
Yeah, that had COVID-19, right? I mean, that actually happened to you, correct?
Yeah, we did not. No tracing. I know I understand the tracing. Yeah, we did not trace our employees. I know that there are things out there, but as a company, we chose not to. But yeah, I'm not aware of what apps might be out there.
Okay. And what about another question? What do you think, you know, like in this case too, they have a student that cannot wear a mask, but it's either special education or disabled, so benefits most to be on site. Like, how do you manage, you know, somebody not wearing a mask? I know it sounds like you talked to your legal team, you know, is there some steps or advice you'd give there?
So we haven't had any cases like that because our nature of our business is sports. And so in order to play sports, most of the people would not really fall into that category. In our corporate office, we haven't really had anyone, and we decided not to open the corporate office, so we're pretty much all working at home. So I haven't dealt with a case like that, but I would imagine that if we did, let's say in the office and someone cannot wear a mask for some reason, we may provide a certain workstation, have plexiglasses around them to kind of enable them to continue working. That's what we would do, I think.
Okay, gotcha. And I think just my last question for you would be you know, I know when all this came about, you put a task force together within your company, correct? To just kind of plan, which I thought was really interesting. I mean, can you talk about that just for a few minutes, just on how you guys decided to do that? Who was on the task force, you know, for your company?
Sure. So the task force had our chief marketing officer our human resource director. We have a director of culture and development, so that person was on there, CFO, myself, in-house counsel, and then our chief operating officer, so head of operations. So we had department heads from each area, and we felt that this impacts every area of the company. And as a management team, we came together and talked through. The focus was on our employees and our customers. How can we engage and how can we emerge out of this? So that's how we formed a task force. I think the idea came from the board of directors, because board of directors have many other companies and serve on different boards, and the idea came up from one of theirs, so we implemented that at TOCA.
Yeah, that's great. No, I think that was a good way to tackle it for sure. Okay. Before, let's launch our third polling question before we jump into Nick. So this one is, once given the all clear, what percentage of your staff do you plan to have work remotely? So once we, the county says, yes, we can open up, it will be less than 10%, 10 to 25%, 26 to 50%, 51 to 75%, or more than 75%. So what do you, I know a lot of companies are looking at, keeping remote, some will be bringing back. So this will be an interesting comparison. Give it just another second for people to vote. So it looks like less than 10%, 38%. The 10 to 25% is at 25%, and then the last three categories are 13% each. So it looks like it'll still be less in that 10 to or up to 25% range. So that's interesting. So with that, Nick, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think that those results are telling in a way, and I'll speak to those really quickly, in that the conversation has changed a bit since the pandemic started, and the work from home experiment, or mandate rather, was deemed largely successful by a lot of companies. Not a lot of productivity loss, and this is what conventional wisdom and what's in the news would tell you. Not a lot of productivity lost, perceived benefits of not commuting, and we've seen a shift. And now there are an equal number of articles talking about a return to the workplace and how the home just isn't suitable for doing meaningful work. And in fact, a lot of people's identities are a large part of their identity is how they work, where they work, and what they do as a career. And who better to qualify that portion of your identity than your colleagues and the people that understand what you do and how you do it. So we think that the workplace is going to come back different, but just as important as ever. And prior to the pandemic and going into the future, what our group does a lot of with our clients is advise on workplace strategy, culture consulting, space planning. And in a typical scenario, we'll work with Mike Lewis or Scott Johnstone, who you were introduced to earlier, David Marino, who was a panelist not too long ago, and all of our brokers. They will bring us in to speak to their clients about space strategies. And as the pandemic occurred, we were looking for ways to advise our clients in a helpful, meaningful way still. And the two questions, like I said earlier, that came out more often than not were, how do we get people back into the office safely? And what are our future space needs going to look like? And of course, we're not medical professionals. We do follow CDC and OSHA bulletins when they're posted, but what we are experts in space and in furniture and interior design and architecture, and how space affects people, both from a social perspective, also from a comfort level perspective. And we thought, okay, how can we be helpful? The first thing that I want to tackle is working in the future and space needs in the future. The pandemic has accelerated, some of you have probably already heard this before, the pandemic has really accelerated what was already happening in the workplace. And that was the continued adoption of video conferencing technology and a work-life balance that is blurred, and also an ability to be mobile and work remotely. And those trends were already in place, and I think that they will continue as trends. And so one of the questions that we answer for people is how do I make my workplace still feel dynamic and energized if a portion of our team is going to be working remotely at some level? The last thing you want to see is empty desks and real estate that's being paid for and not utilized or underutilized. So we're working on different strategies with clients about how they're going to use the office in the future. And we've literally talked to, I was trying to count them earlier, over 100 companies in the last 5 months about either getting back to the office or what their future space needs look like. And I think that we're learning from each other in a lot of ways. And each company is unique and will have a different set of circumstances that leads them back to what their space needs are going to be. So we're talking about some of the older concepts, I would say, about hoteling and individual desks and individual spaces for more permanent staff that keep the office running, operations type staff, accounting, finance, people that really need to be in the office on a day-to-day basis, versus people that are in a capacity to work remotely and don't need either the function, whether you're a scientist and you need lab space, you may frequent the office more often. If you are an accountant that was used to working in other people's offices on a consultancy basis anyway, you might be able to work anywhere. So depending on the needs of our client, we'll discuss what we think that future trajectory looks like, and take it from there. I don't think that you will largely see one of the metrics we use to define how much space a company needs currently is to assign a number, and let's say 200 square feet per person, per employee was an old metric that we used. Today, you can't use a metric that bases square footage on an individual employee. You have to look around at the space utilization and understand exactly what functional and support items your teams are going to need, and what amenities are going to be beneficial for them when they come into the office. And again, I mentioned it before, determine whether you will have individual spaces for people to work permanently, or whether you feel that you can work in a staggered shift or partially mobile configuration. So that's where we're at in space of the future. I mentioned this before. One of the things that we're doing for clients right now is our physical distancing analysis. And what that is an attempt from a space configuration standpoint to look at a client's current space and see how we can reconfigure it so that we're maintaining physical distancing, and how we are staggering shifts or de-densifying spaces to promote that feeling of well-being, if not a real benefit. And Stacy, now would be a good time. I have a diagram here, a sample diagram that we've produced, if if that can come up. Here's an example of a physical distancing analysis that we're putting together for teams. And this is really a starting place for companies, a roadmap, if you will, to understand your space and how physical distancing affects how many people you would have or be able to have on a return to work on day one, and maintain that comfort level and the guidelines as we understand them today. And in a physical distancing analysis, what we're doing is we're identifying entry and exit points into a space and locations for personal protective equipment, where those should go, how many you should have in place. And again, these are conversations with different companies. You may see a roadmap after we have produced it and say, well, that would never work for our company. It's a conversation back and forth. Like I said, every company is unique in how they work. And what we're doing is really showing you how to get back into the office safely. We identify pinch points and areas that you need to be careful when maintaining physical distancing. We're providing guidelines for amenity usage, conference room usage, break room usage. A conference room may only hold a third or less of the individuals that it once did. Again, we're not trying to make deep cuts here, because we do believe that a vaccine or a therapeutic is right around the corner and that people will get back to working as normally as possible. But still, with some of the underlying thoughts the pandemic has created in terms of density and in physical distancing. So the other thing that I would add here is that we provide path of travel and circulation points. We try to lead people through one entry point so that they can sanitize before entering the office, and have a one-way path where we can, and then we provide exit points as well. The last thing that I was going to add to this is that this has helped a lot of our clients feel comfortable in making plans, and as a communication tool for their employees, to let their employees know that they are thinking about this, that they've engaged somebody to think about it with them. And they generally will couple these with their own brief or set of program protocols on how to return to the office safely. And we are able to integrate these roadmaps in with those protocols that they have in place for this comprehensive communication tool. And that is the biggest thing that companies can do to return their people to the office safely, is to over communicate with them. So that's really all I had to share today. There is again, as we're learning more every day as the pandemic continues, and we're open and available for any comments or thoughts that you would have in regard to your own office, and we're happy to speak with you about it.
Nick, there's a couple questions came in, Nick, that I think would be interesting for you to talk about. One is,
Sure.
you know, working from home is becoming the norm, and the employer is responsible for the health and safety of the home workspace, which I'm sure Blaine can talk about that a little bit from an insurance, from a risk perspective. But they're asking, will your services extend to the home workspace?
Not at this time. We're really focused on the workspace, as you alluded, and what Blaine will talk about is that I think many companies are going to find themselves in a scenario where they have employees signing waivers, and the work from home space is unique. It is too unique probably for us to tackle, and I don't see us really getting into that.
Sure. Okay. This is a good question too. What type of behavioral studies, psychological profiles go along with interior planning and space needs?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Interior designers are an interesting bunch in that some are very visual from an aesthetic standpoint. Others put a lot of psychological underpinnings into their designs. I think right now what we're seeing with our roadmap is that they really are a psychological tool. De-densifying space is the single biggest thing, in my opinion, that you can do to make people feel safe. A lot of our clients in other regions like San Francisco, Seattle, are not as concerned about their office as they are getting to the office via public transportation. And so that's a whole set of parameters that we can't solve for, and we'll need other solutions. But what we can do is provide psychological comfort in the office. And so if in your communications with your staff, if you can tell them things like, I know we used to have free food in the break room, please don't bring donuts in for people to use, then there's an understanding that these protocols are being followed, and there's a psychological benefit to communicating with your staff what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. But again, density is one of the, and de-densifying spaces is going to go a long way.
Okay. Here's another one. I don't know. Risk-wise, is it better to pay allowance to staff to work from home or pay for desk, chair, computer, etc.? Have you looked at that at all?
I haven't looked at that. That almost sounds, when we talk about risk, that sounds like it's going to be in Blaine's wheelhouse.
Right.
And if there's no further questions, or if there's one or two more, that'd be a perfect segue into Blaine.
Yeah. So no, I think that is a good segue. I just want to launch one quick polling question, and then we'll jump over to Blaine. So let's launch our fourth polling question. So how has the remote working model changed your company's productivity levels? Hasn't changed. Productivity levels are down. Productivity levels are up. So how is the remote working model done for you at your company? So looks like we have a good percentage voted, and it looks like 70% say productivity levels are down. So that's interesting from the work from home. So that definitely supports what you're saying, Nick, on trying to get people back to the office. So excellent. Thank you, Nick. So with that, Blaine, we will jump over to you.
I'm curious. You ask a bunch of CFOs, of course, they say productivity's down. I'd be curious if this was an HR panel, how they would view that. So, yeah, there's a lot going on. Surprisingly, there's a ton of new stuff going on in the insurance world. I know a lot of you probably look at insurance as perhaps a bit of a necessary evil that's kind of stagnated. But I'll lead you with some bad news and then some good news, and then a few things to think about. When we were first shut down, and keep in mind, Maureen, I know you have offices in Atlanta and some other states. What I'll be speaking of is focused on California. There's been some things with regard to executive orders from Gavin Newsom. But there's a lot of it which is going to hold true regardless of where your locations are. When we were first shut down, we started to field a lot of calls about business interruption. Real quick, high level. If, for example, Maureen had a facility that burned down and the property insurance would trigger and provide money to rebuild the facility. Let's assume that it's going to take a year before she can be back up and running. The business interruption component would replace the lost profit that facility was generating. There's some other components that I won't get into, but that was what we fielded a lot of calls on, where our facility has been shut down. I want to trigger my business interruption because I'm losing revenue. And unfortunately, there was a lot of misinformation out there. The insurance company said, we are not going to pay that, because in the insurance policy, if you take the time to read one of those, which I actually do, that is triggered by a property loss. So in the example of Toka, a fire destroys the facility, which prevents the revenue. Unfortunately, a closure due to a pandemic, there wasn't a property loss to trigger the business interruption. I know that there were some politicians who were wanting to get their name in the paper and look good to their constituents, who were saying that they were going to force the insurance companies to pay these claims. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. If you were closed just because of the pandemic and there was no property loss to trigger that, I would bet a lot of money that that is not going to get paid. Interestingly, a lot of our clients that were closed due to COVID, when the protests devolved into rioting and then some stores were damaged, that damage was able to then trigger the business interruption, interestingly. One of the other big issues that we're dealing with right now is workers' compensation. This is something that has seen a lot due to COVID. Again, by executive order from our governor, he ordered that employees that return to work, if they contract COVID, it will be assumed that it was because they went back to work. Now, all of us have lives outside of work. It was originally, prior to the executive order, if I contracted COVID, they would probably assume, hey, maybe he got it at a barbecue, maybe he was out and about at the store. It would be very difficult to say that I contracted it because I went into the office. However, again, with the executive order, it's going to be assumed that you did get it because you went into work. So it's on the employer to prove that that happened away from work. So if they go to Facebook and they see that I was at a big political rally and a bunch of people down there came down with it there, then they could perhaps fight it. But I think at this point, it's safe to say that any of your employees that contract COVID while they're going into work, I'm not, Woodruff is completely remote right now. If I come down with COVID, it will not be picked up by workers' compensation. This is only for people who are having their employees return to work. The good news on that is that if Maureen, for example, has her instructors teaching classes, if they come down with COVID, again in California, it will be covered under workers' compensation, but it will not affect your experience modification number. That is to say, if one of her employees twisted an ankle or broke an ankle and required surgery, and workers' compensation shelled out $100,000 to fix that injury, that $100,000 loss is going to follow Maureen for the next 3 years while she renews, and she's well aware of what the experience modification will do. She's going to be paying higher premiums because they're going to say TOCA runs an unsafe environment. If you file claims due to COVID, those will be picked up by work comp, again in California, and that will not, if it costs $100,000, even if somebody was hospitalized, that will not follow you for the next 3 years. That will be excluded from your workers' compensation. Nick, you had asked about, or Stacy maybe, asked about workers' compensation and working from home. This is something that it will be covered. If you guys, I'm clearly working right now, which much to your amusement, I fell out of my chair and hurt my back, that would be covered by workers' compensation. What gets a little tricky is I think a lot of us are, taking more breaks. And again, just as if I was walking down at the office at Woodruff and twisted my ankle on my way to get a cup of coffee, that would be covered. It would be covered at home as well. The issue becomes, what happens if I conclude this webinar and then go outside and shoot some baskets with my son? Well, I'm on work time, but I'm not doing a work event. And that's where, if I said, hey, I twisted my ankle and there's a lot of room for, I guess, mistruths to be claimed as, oh no, I was loading paper into the printer and I twisted my ankle. That's going to be very hard to disprove. And that's something that you just need to be working with your employees and speaking with them about. A couple other things I wanted to touch on, and these are exclusively due to COVID. Maureen, I love your story about sending out the footballs, and a lot of people are doing, things to kind of, what's the word, amend their business model. I know that videos were not necessarily a big part of Toka before, but you guys said, hey, we've got to stay engaged with our customers. One of the biggest ones we're seeing is delivery. A lot of restaurants were not doing delivery before, and now they need to get up and running, and so maybe suddenly they're offering delivery service. This is something that you need to speak with your broker about as you amend your business model. Something like auto, let's make sure that you're covered. Make sure that as your business model evolves and you offer more services to address COVID, let's make sure that we've taken a good look at those risks and we've decided what to do with them, whether that's insurance, whether that's some loss prevention, something with auto, just making sure your employees, if you I send Nick out to start delivering food, this is something he's never done before. What kind of driving record does Nick have? What kind of insurance is he carrying? And so we want to look at those measures coupled with your commercial policies just to make sure that you are covered. And again, we commend all the people that are being creative with how to get their business up and running. But, let's take a look at that and make sure that the businesses, in their efforts to recoup revenue, that they're not opening themselves up to something that could potentially lose all of that revenue and then some. One final thing that we're seeing a lot more of right now is cyber liability. We're seeing a lot of claims associated with cyber. With a lot of companies that are working from home, they're working off of laptops, they're working off of networks that might not necessarily be as secure. And it's dwindled a little bit now, but I mean, speaking for myself, when we were first locked down, I was clicking on all kinds of weird stuff because everybody was so hungry for information about COVID, and people were, they were cloning emails, they're sending things out, oh, this is a survey from HR about working from home, and people are just, clicking on things that they wouldn't necessarily be clicking on before. And we've been seeing a lot of, phishing scams like that. And I think it's just important, as we're having such a big population of our workers working from home, speak with your broker, speak with your IT. Maybe this is something that you felt wasn't a big exposure before because you weren't storing credit cards. The exposures and risks we typically think of with cyber, now that you've got 50, 80, 100% of your workforce working from home, might be a good time to reevaluate some of those protocols, and then of course speak with your broker to see if there's an insurance solution in place that you might want to consider.
Blaine, there are a couple questions came in that I think you can answer. The first one says, Blaine, you already answered my question on the mod rate. Thank you. How are the differences between force majeure and act of God handled with COVID-19? Can you talk about that a little bit?
This is the softball you're going to try to give me?
Yeah.
That one I do not know. I'm not sure how to answer that, to be honest.
Okay. No, that's no problem. Another question is, what extent are employees going to screen their employees for COVID? So do you have any insights on that?
Well, and I think that's something that, that Maureen touched on. I think this is, we're all, as much as a lot of us are locked down, we are still going out and about, and, a little bit more now than perhaps in the beginning. And we're seeing facilities, whether it's retail or the mall, that are doing the screenings that, that we've all seen, whether that's a temperature check, whether that's personal protective equipment. And as far as screening employees, I would think that it would fall under those risk mitigation techniques. If, for example, using me, if Woodruff decides, okay, we're back, we're up and running, and if we had the person who's normally at the entrance, having somebody do the temperature checks, enforcing the masks, things of that nature, I think are good. As far as testing people prior to coming back, I think that's a great idea. I've had clients that have reached out about having on-site testing available, both prior to anybody testing positive and certainly after having one employee test positive, they'll bring in, and there are companies that will do this for you, come in and they will do on-site testing, similar to some of us have, every year flu shots are given at my work. I think it would be something similar to that.
Great. Okay. Another question would be in regards to, with workers' comp and people working from home, would you recommend employers ask for pictures of their workspace, to check for safety, that kind of thing? Can you do that? Should you do that?
Yeah, and so interestingly, I think I'd mentioned earlier, we had shifted to a flex schedule for a lot of our workers, and people who were opting to be a part of that program, we did have them send in pictures. We wanted to make sure that there was a dedicated workspace. If you have to work from home for a couple hours and you just sit on your bed with your laptop, that's one thing. If you're going to be working from home 50% of the time, that was not a solution we felt was going to be effective and be able to maintain productivity. So we asked for pictures to be sent to ensure that there was a safe workplace, a dedicated workspace, and then, and only then, would you be eligible to be working from home on the flex schedule. It's a little different now in that people are required to work from home. And so I think if given the option, we can insist on some parameters, whether it be safety or otherwise. Right now, when we're forcing people to work and to not come into the office, it's a little harder to insist on something like that, because if I send a picture of my workspace and Woodruff doesn't feel it's safe or appropriate in any way, what is their recourse? That is to say, okay, well, I can't work then. And so that puts you into a bit of a box.
Great. That's good advice. Okay. Let's launch our next polling questions, and I'm going to circle back. A few other questions have come in for everybody, but let's launch our next polling question, which is, who are you consulting, if anyone, for back to work plans? So options are, we're consulting our insurance partner, we're consulting our legal partner, we're reviewing CDC and WHC guidelines. We put together an internal task force from several departments, all of the above. So what are you thinking about, or who are you talking to as you look at your back to work plans for your employees? So it looks like, let's see the results, like 88% were all of the above, so that's good. And 13% they're putting together an internal task force. So it's good to see everybody's using their resources. So a couple questions came in, if I can circle back to everybody. Maureen, one, can you talk a little more detail? Like, you did say that you had one of your trainers came down with COVID, and then what was the plan? Can you talk a little bit more about on the approach on their back to work, like how you brought them back to work, how you worked through that?
Sure, absolutely. So once an employee was tested positive, we asked employees to stay home, and there's a 14-day period we pay the employee, be it an employee or a family member. We cover them for the 14-day period. Then we kept in touch with them, asked them to test, and they needed to test twice to make sure that they got 2 negative results before they can return to the office or to the center. So that's the constant contact with them, getting the results, and once they felt good and they were tested negative twice, then they were able to return back to the center. So that's was a really important one. From the employee standpoint, knowing that the company was there supporting them, and then also from the other employees within the center, knowing that the employee cannot return until he has 2 negative tests.
Perfect. Okay. That makes sense. Nick, a question for you. When looking at reopening, what's the most critical thing that an employer can practice in implementing a return to work policy? I think you talked about this a little bit, but what would be your number one focus.
To over communicate your strategy with your team and to make sure that they are informed and they're confident that you are putting your best effort into returning them to work safely.
Perfect. And then I want to throw one thing out there. Gita asked, and this is really probably to our attendees as well, to see if anybody has a resource. I just want to throw this out there. But she said, we created a task force to bring COVID testing on our school site. It's a safe environment for educators, students, and their families. We're trying to partner with local healthcare partners, mobile units, but not very successful. Again, various school sites across California and out of state. Kaiser's the only one we're successful to partner, but again, they won't.
Did we lose her?
I'm not sure we can hear you.
Stacy, I think your audio cut out.
Yeah.
Glad that wasn't just me.
So this is
We're at
Debbie.
9 o'clock. That might have been the end.
Yeah, we just blew it up. Why don't we launch the last polling question? I think this will be good for Nick. Are you considering altering your real estate footprint? Yes? No?
Oh, Nick, I feel for you on this one, buddy.
Okay. 56% are considering altering it. It's lower than I would have thought.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry.
Blaine, that
It's
doesn't
just
say less space.
Okay.
To widen your
That was our last.
paths.
Okay. All right, so we just launched the last poll connection, I should say, right? Question?
And 56% said that they were thinking about altering their space.
Perfect. Okay. So I think with that, Maureen, do you want to wrap up some of your thoughts on the program today and let everybody know?
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely. I guess one of the things that really stands out is we've got to adjust with the times, right? So with COVID-19, we all came into this and had to think on our feet and how can we exist as a company. As we can see, for some companies, it's actually been great. Companies in logistics and delivery, they did exceptional during this time. But look at Zoom. Zoom has done phenomenal, right? So if you're in the right business at the right time, but if you're not, you can alter what you do. Like we know Uber, we can't really take Uber and Lyft as much now, but Uber is in the delivery business now. So they have altered and made some changes. Like at Toka, we did the same. Initially, we do not want to lose touch with our customers. So we were not in the video business. So we got into the video business and got them engaged, and we found a way to make it work. And many other businesses, restaurants is a key one. We all love to go to the restaurants, right? But we can't go indoors. So in the parking lot, putting up tents and customers coming and still able to go out and dine at a restaurant. So finding creative ways to make it happen. And like Nick was sharing, the office space and the creativity and how to make it work in the future. Talking about hoteling station, are we going to have these normal huge office spaces, or are we going to be sharing or having mobile locations? And Blaine shared a lot with insurances. With all these creativity and these different ways that we are doing things, definitely want to check in with our insurance brokers to make sure that we're covered, or we have to adjust our policies and things like that. So from a CFO standpoint, there's a lot that we have to change too. Previously, we wrote checks and we mailed it out to our customers, and we like to buy that 3 to 5 days, right? Checks in the mail type of thing. It's mainly ACH and credit card payments now. So adjusting to that, a lot of businesses pretty much had plowed their servers on the cloud, so that working from home wasn't that difficult. But some companies still had servers in their offices, and working from home had a lot of adjustments with that. But being able to adapt to the times and make these changes is what will carry us through as business. And as CFOs, we have a really huge responsibility. Cash management. During this time, no revenue is coming in. Businesses are closed. How do you manage your cash during this time frame? Working with your banks, the PPP certainly helped, your lines of credit, and just managing your CapEx expenditure in these various ways as CFOs to carry us through this. So from that standpoint, wrapping up from my end, I believe there is just so much that CFOs have to do, and having the checking with our insurance brokers, looking at how to optimize our spacing and things like that. So I can pass it on to Nick next to wrap up your thoughts on it.
Yeah, thank you. I think from our perspective, and it's funny, as we were having this conversation, I was thinking to Blaine's comment, we usually do talk to COOs and HR and HR folks rather than CFOs. So I understand that there's a very different set of primary obligations and thoughts about how the business is running. But again, my advice would be to over communicate your return to work policy and to take the steps to either de-densify your space or look at staggering your work schedules for a slow return into the office. And I think that we will be back to full capacity, quickly, optimistically quickly.
Yeah, and just to wrap things up on my end, I think it's very important to speak to your insurance broker. One of the things that I hadn't touched on with regard to workers' compensation is the change in job duties and how that may affect your actual premium. If you've reduced payroll, it will get trued up at audit. But that's something to reach out to your broker. Explain all the changes that have happened to your business. If you've laid off half of your workforce, obviously that's going to affect your premiums. And we've been successful in reaching out, and as opposed to waiting a year and having that audit where you get the credit sent to you, maybe you can get a midterm adjustment. If you have a lot of employees that their job duties have shifted, maybe they're in a lower class code, and you can be taking advantage of that now as opposed to waiting to the end of the policy term. Again, I love all the creative solutions that companies are coming up with, to really thrive during these uncertain times. But reach out to your broker. If your broker isn't returning their phone calls, please call me. And just outline what you're doing, what changes you've made, what changes you're thinking about making, and see how these carriers can work with you, and minimize the risk, and perhaps get some premium dollars refunded now as opposed to at the end of the year, because as all the CFOs will know, anytime you can get money now as opposed to 6 or 12 months from now, that's better.
Great. Good advice, Blaine. I noticed a couple questions came in probably when I got knocked out when my daughter was signing on her Zoom call for school, but so I missed these. But Maureen, one question for you. Did the employee claim workers' comp, or did the employee who contracted COVID go on STD?
We did workers' comp for our employees, so we covered them for the 14 days. Okay,
perfect. And then I think there was one more.
Were those California employees, Maureen?
Yes, California employees.
Okay. Nick, are you seeing more use of plexiglass shield barriers in the workplace?
I'm seeing a lot of interest in plexiglass barriers, but for one reason or another, I haven't seen a lot of implementation. Part of that is that there's a lot of news that they're not necessarily helpful. I think that any barrier that you put up, again, has a psychological component to it, and we've gotten a lot of requests for plexiglass. We also have seen a number of requests for furniture reconfiguration. So if it's something that a company is interested in, they should speak to their furniture provider, because there are a lot of new solutions out there for putting panels onto open office desking. And so plexiglass is one short-term solution, but there are also longer-term solutions that are more aesthetically pleasing and maybe more appropriate for your work.
Great. So I want to say thank you so much to Maureen, Blaine, and Nick for sharing all your valuable insights this morning. I'll send up a follow-up email with some contact information if anyone wants to reach out to them directly on anything. Just a couple quick things before we go. Next month, September 23rd, we're going to talk about going public virtually. We know right now there's been dozens of companies taking a successful IPO plunge, even in this remote world. So we've got some experts and some people who've gone through this that are going to talk about their experiences and what you can expect as doing it remotely. So that should be, really good. We have a lot of things online right now in our virtual world. So please check out our events page. It's on the front page at the CFOLC.com. You can see what's coming up. If you're not a member, there's so many benefits right now. I can't say enough about our CFO Connect. That's our forum for the CFOs where you can ask questions, you can get information. It's been amazing what's been going back and forth, during these past few months with the pandemic. So such a great resource. As a member too, you have access, like today's recording will be on there in about 48 hours, but you can look at any of the past events. You can see what's coming up.
We've lost you, Stacy.
I haven't seen the one about the IPO. That would be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of our past recordings are on there. And now with COVID in the last few months, there's hundreds of things on there, which is amazing. So, and for members, right now we have 27 chapters, and so essentially 27 webinars a month, which is pretty unreal. So, and if you're a California member, you can go to the New York event, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot more that members can take advantage of right now. So it's a really interesting time, as we know.
One of the great things about having it electronically now or over the web, we can attend other chapter events, not just our local chapter, right? Before we were going in person and just ours. And I'm kind of excited to attend some of the other ones. So thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, all the chapters all really have a different personality as well. So even with our California chapters, it's very interesting to see what's, what our steering committees, as you know, Blaine and Maureen, choose to do. So, and it's all based on the local area. So, there's always something different. So, but, pretty soon in the next couple of months, you'll see a lot of the chapters are going to be having a sort of an economic summit. So those will always be interesting, I think, to see the economists say what they feel about what's going on. You'll get the real story versus what you hear in the media.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we'll close it out now. Thank you so much, everyone. And again, just to repeat what Stacy said, she's going to be sending out a follow-up email with Nick's great slide, so everyone can see that, and information, your contact information, so people can get a hold of you.
All right, sounds great.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Great day.